So today we are continuing with our discussion on the new serialized permits which the government is proposing, which has conditions that are attached to it. And generally, we believe that the conditions attached thereto symbolizing the policy direction which the government intends to take in the new proposed, in the impending land policy that we are all waiting for. So as promised in the previous video, we're going to discuss further as to some of the points or the conditions that have been attached to the permit. The serialized permit, we are yet to see the physical nature of it, but we are just commenting around the provisions made thereof. So one of the conditions that I noted, which I'm hoping that there's still room for consideration and also amendment thereof, is the issue that I note with great concern that the proposed serialized payments also do not discuss or go into detail about what happens to the farm upon divorce or death of a spouse. Yet you find that under the A1 permit, the government took a deliberate approach and made provisions under a statutory instrument for that specific purpose, to distribute the land in the event of divorce, in the event of death. It also went ahead to touch on issues to do with polygamous setups. All those areas were covered for and were taken care of, and so does the 99-year lease. It's very explicit. It even talks more and goes further about successive plans, which is something which is lacking in the proposed permit. And you'd find that spouses that benefited under the offer letters or the A2 permits are left in the hands of dealing with the Matrimonial Causes Act and the Constitution and all those other acts that then regulates properties of that nature. But we are all aware that indeed the courts are reluctant to interfere in the land issues, and they usually refer such matters to ordinary administrators who are ordinary people to then decide what then becomes of the property in the event of divorce or in the event of death. Yet sometimes some of these stories of inheritance or divorce packaged with such complexities that maybe some administrators might find difficult to comprehend. So it poses a difficult situation when you leave the interpretation thereof to administrators, and the courts are reluctant to deal with the issue. So we're hoping that maybe there'll be that deliberate approach to then include such explicit statements and that are clear and precise, at least some form of certainty is required in that regard. And you'd find that currently, and understandably so, the government is also a bit reluctant to subdivide farms upon divorce, because look, how many times does an individual divorce? There's no limit as to how many times you divorce. Then if we're going to subdivide the farm each time we divorce a spouse, it would defeat the whole purpose, especially when we look at the A2 farms to be specific. These are meant to be contractual, on a contractual basis, where we're expecting a farmer to be producing for export and for the national market as well, to feed the nation. So when we then continuously subdivide the farm, it will eventually turn into an A1 farm. So the discretion really is left with the Ministry of Lands as to when and how they then choose to subdivide a farm. And we're simply saying maybe we need the ministry to put it in the open, what criteria are they going to use, how many times are they going to subdivide, under what circumstances would the farm be subdivided, so that it's clear there's some level of certainty. If the government decide that it will only subdivide the farm upon divorce maybe once, any other subsequent marriages will not benefit from the land reform, then that's another issue. But we need some framework, a proper framework, and some standardization of some sort to be out in the open, so that discretion is not left to a few individuals, And sometimes some women, I know I have some clients and facing difficulties in having their farms subdivided because it is not clear how and under what circumstances can the administrative authority refuse to subdivide. So we need a formula of issues of viability, sustainability, the purpose for which the farm was meant. Will we continue to achieve it? How big is it? Should we then subdivide? And remember, not the whole farm is arable land. And besides, farming is not just about cropping. There are whole other issues that can be done on a farm. So we need that. It's an elephant in the room, and I think maybe it's high time we started discussing about that elephant. People need certainty, and I thought that at this juncture, the A2 offer letter holders would also have the same benefit as the permits, A1 permits have, as the holders of 99-year leases have. They have a latitude, a explicit explanation of what happens. Supposedly there's a peculiar scenario like that. The second issue is the issue of requiring a farmer to be a permanent resident at the farm. In my personal opinion, I think this is a bit insensitive to the local farmers, who in some instances are employed in different part of towns, so that they then sustain the farming business. Because remember, most of our financial institutions are not really capacitating some of these farmers. Issues to do with security that needs to be deposited before farmers get loans. And for the few institutions that are doing so and assisting farmers, certainly they cannot assist everyone. So in the absence of that, I think it's not noble for farmers to then be required to be stationed in one place, and it also infringes into one's personal space and choice to decide where to reside. And at the end of the day, how do you define permanent residency? Is it someone who stays there every day? Is it someone who comes by weekend? It's going to be difficult, and also it has to be something that doesn't infringe in people's right to freedom of choosing where they want to stay. And also we have children that go to school. All these other things that come into play, accessibility or such other basic human rights, as opposed to the location of where the farm is located and how practical that is. I thought that by putting in place a prerequisite that a farmer should construct permanent structures at their farm was a sign of commitment on the part of the farmer, as opposed to trying to force him to stay at the farm every day. I think what we need to instill in farmers, myself included, is the issue of utilization of the farm, right, and commitment to stay in the farm, more than it has to do, a commitment to do farming, more than it has to do with staying at the farm. There are some people who are permanently resident at the farm, but they're not producing anything. So we are hoping that condition can be looked into, amended if it's possible, or done away with. And then there's also a provision that speaks about the requirement that a farmer, when they want to sublet a farm, they should first seek the authority of the ministry. I personally felt that that wording of subletting, there were so many questions coming in my inbox to say, so are we now allowed to sublet? And then we make an application. What are the conditions that are allowable for subletting? For subletting? And then also there was the wording of subdivision. Are we allowed to subdivide our farms? And of course, subletting is allowed through joint venture agreements that are happening, and people are allowed to have that joint venture agreement signed by the ministry, but the notion or the understanding of subdividing farms is coming out too strongly. And I think maybe there's need for that area to be tackled and to be clarified. My understanding of subdivision that is allowed is when you have maybe an A entitled, who's your child, and maybe you want to then give them a portion of your farm which is big enough to be subdivided. Only in those circumstances can it be, but I think there's need for the authorities to come out clear and discuss this issue openly and discuss the circumstances under which subdivision is being allowed. Is it general subdivision or what is it? There's a lot of noise in the streets to say we are now allowed to subdivide our farms, which is something that I don't think is the intention or was intended there generally. And how many of those subdivisions can be done on a farm? Should they be allowed? So I thank you. And then we have the cancellation of permits after 2 years provision. I'm hoping that farmers will get the opportunity, just like what happens with mining. When mining claims are forfeited, when a miner is not in a position to produce or to pay their obligations, they are given an opportunity to apply for a protection certificate and agree with the minister for the grace period. So we're hoping the same, that farmers can be given that opportunity, because look, life does happen. People fall into financial troubles and setbacks and some sicknesses and all sorts of things. So we're hoping that farmers could also get that. I'm not promoting laziness and non-productivity, but I'm just saying I'm sure the minister will be reasonable enough to understand or to assess whether or not the request is genuine and has got a rightful cause. So, and then also we have the last part about compensation being made for improvements only. I was hoping for indigenous farmers that for those who have benefited in the land reform, under the land reform program, maybe an extension of just going beyond just the improvement made of the farm, because people had plans. You've requested people to file their 5-year plans. They've made commitments, maybe made engagements, maybe started some projects, maybe someone was doing fishery at the farm. It doesn't require so much structures, expensive structures, right? And then when the government comes to take away, and then they say they will simply give you for improvements, yet you had already started a business, and this business you were anticipating was going to take you for 5, 10, or even continue for generations. So loss of business, potential business, and to what extent, so that the compensation is then meaningful to the person, for the indigenous persons at the end of the day. So that is all from me. I hope this has been helpful. So on our next video, we shall be doing and discussing some mining questions. I will choose which mining question I'm going to discuss with you on.